So hello everyone, welcome to the 21st edition of Art Power Hong Kong Online Talk. I'm Cusson Cheng, art editor of Art and Peace, and will be moderating today's talk. And please also welcome Fiona Römer, Senior Director of Hauser and Wirth, Henrietta Tsui-Leung, founder of Galerie Ora-Ora, and of course Lorraine Kiang Malingue, Director and co-founder of Edouard Malingue Galerie. So this week's talk, we're focusing on the phenomenon of millennial collectors and also their approach of art collecting. So without further ado, I would definitely love to kind of ask about this phenomena of a rise of millennial collectors in Asia. So it seems like this is really like happening in the region specifically. So I would love to ask our guest speakers, why do you think it is so, and how will you describe this particular group of stakeholders in the art industry, and also perhaps what are some of the behaviors that you observe or identify when you engage with them? Perhaps we can start with Fiona.
Yeah, hello everyone. Delighted to be part of this conversation today. Well, it's an interesting question, right? When you talk about why China, and I did some research on some data, and we all know that wealth creation in China has been incredible. And I take China as one example for Asia. And just looking at actually last year, there were 161 individuals worldwide that made more than $5 billion more wealth creation, and 85 of them have been in China. And since like 5 years, like every 3.5 days, there's a new billionaire, which is 3 times faster than the US. So you see in terms of wealth creation and possibilities on the financial level, I think Asia is in an incredibly interesting position. And then adding on top of it, you know, US and Europe have an incredible wealth of collecting over decades and generations. And some of the collectors obviously in Asia have that as well, but there is an incredible space in being innovative and really shaping the cultural landscape of Asia. And maybe these younger people see that opportunity and step in and see that there's space for them to really make an impact.
So when you kind of interact with this group of like millennial collectors, what are kind of like aspirations or personalities perhaps that you identify? Because since they're more like a younger generation among the art industry, is there anything different from perhaps our previous generations, or you know, people or collectors who are more experienced?
Well, you know, I think the way they collect information is very different. It's fast-paced, it's in-depth, obviously social media, but other channels really building up their own opinions on how they want to read a situation and want to make their own impact. I think they understood that kind of knowledge is king. And if you look even at international institutions like MoMA or the Guggenheim or like Sotheby's Institute of Art, you know, they create these tailored program for millennials to really kind of cater to their interests and needs. Then I also feel that they're very confident, you know, to be in dialogue with their international peers in the West, really seeking to have these dialogues and conversations. They're very mobile, so, you know, they would travel all over the world, sit on international boards, meet collectors, and they really create their own vision and come back to Asia and then find a way they can create an impact, which is important for their region, which I think is really incredible. And in that sense, they're tastemakers, you know, and some of them come back and create their foundations and private museums, and that kind of, you know, is adding to the private museum landscape in Asia in general. And I also see some social responsibility, you know, they're very much in the way they collect. It's not just about collecting, but it's about education and the social impact they have while they do so.
Interesting. Lorraine, I would like to know more about your thoughts on this too, because your gallery is perhaps dealing with a slightly more niche market in terms of the artists you represent or the works that they create. So I definitely want to know from your experience, how do you interact with this group of millennial collectors, and is there like a particular trend or habit that you identify when you interact with them?
So I feel that my experience with millennials has been very interesting. I think they are a generation of people who are being educated as we go with this business through these recent years. And so it's very hard to, I think, to coin them as how they should be or what they are like, because I think that their speed of growth is very rapid. And but what I find is interesting is that they are the most interesting group of collectors to educate and to nurture, because there's so much room for growth in terms of what their interests are, and also the potential of this generation. So also because they're usually quite young, they are very receptive to advices, to suggestions, and also therefore opening doors for them is probably easier as well. So yeah, I think they're very receptive and open. And another thing is, I think they have well understood that art collecting is also a way of giving them a sense of identity. And this kind of identity is very unique. So it's almost like to them a way of life. You know, it's the same as when you collect, when you drive a car, or the way you carry your day to day. I think art collecting is becoming part of what they are, and they have understood that by choosing a particular type of work or following a certain artist's practice, they are closer in line in thinking with such artists. So it's interesting. I think it's not because there's so many artists we work with who are similar in age or slightly older than who they are. They are able to relate also to the artist much more than if they were to collect, let's say, an artist who's much more senior or who has passed away. I think they still have a respect for that, but that connection with someone who is of the same generation, living, the same life as they are, I think that's what they really resonate with, and it's interesting to see that. Yeah.
So it seems like art collecting has become part of their daily life rather than something that it's very isolated. It seems like it's already incorporated in their, I don't know, their way of living, for example. So I do want to follow up this question to Henrietta, and because I know that perhaps your gallery also frequently deals with a lot of Chinese collectors or Taiwanese collectors. So I want to know if this kind of what Lorraine has kind of described also has a similar vein from a gallery. Hello, excuse me. Henrietta, can you hear us clearly? It seems there might be some technical issues, but perhaps we can, Lorraine, perhaps do you have anything to add on that?
With what subject?
Right. So because I assume your gallery also dealt with a lot of mainland Chinese or Taiwanese collectors. I think besides Hong Kong, Taiwan has become like one of the most robust country that starts to really develop their art scene, and the way of art collecting. From your experience, do you think there are slight difference between Taiwanese collectors and Hong Kong collectors, for example, I mean, as in millennial generation?
Oh, no, I think they're using the same app and, you know, watching Instagram. And so it's very likely that they're looking at the same things most often. And when it comes to the art scene, I think the interface options are quite limiting. Let's say if you're interested to surf on Instagram, you know, there are certain sites that, or certain bloggers that people will start following, and I think millennials really enjoy that. And then you also have art websites where you get you know, news or updates about what is of the trend in the art market. So I think that because of these social media platforms, people tend to be served with similar material, which is why also the millennials are usually quite up to date in terms of what is being offered and what the market believes people should be looking at. So yeah, I wouldn't say there's much difference, but within each country, because millennials, they have friends and they influence also each other, they usually would probably share ideas of what they like quite easily between close friends. So they definitely influence each other within their own circle.
Right. So since you already mentioned a little bit of social media and the influence of this kind of digital era, Fiona, I do want to kind of follow up on that. And I want to know, are there any particular strategies that your gallery has devised to kind of really connect with this group of millennial collectors through perhaps social media or digital engagement?
So yeah, I actually, just to follow up on Lorraine's comment, I actually totally agree with you, Lorraine, in terms of like, it's much less becoming a question about location of these collectors, but more age and, you know, the kind of the millennial artists they want to support and can identify with, which is kind of a shift in the market, right? And that's definitely, as Lorraine said, fueled by how you get your information and how do you research. And so it is an interesting movement. And yes, we are engaging heavily in social media on all levels, you know, obviously Instagram, we are on Facebook, but we also, during the pandemic and even before the pandemic, we started, you know, having videos of the artists talking about their works on our website. We have been heavily engaged with like virtual tours of the studios or live streaming our events in the different gallery locations. So there's a lot of content that you can find on our website. We also have a digital magazine where we feature different artists and showcase very amazing kind of features. And then, yeah, it has been just incredible. And we have been moving into this digital space a bit more since COVID. We launched Art Lab, which is this amazing platform that the first project was actually a virtual Hauser, VR, Hauser and Wirth, where we opened the doors to our gallery, which we will open actually this summer of the harbor of Minorca on a little island. We open it virtually to our audiences. And so we saw that during the pandemic as well, we were able to reach, yeah, great audience through these engagements.
Amazing. So it seems like digital engagement, it's kind of inevitable, no matter if we're during the pandemic or if you want to reach out to millennial collectors or not. I think this particular aspect, it's definitely quite in demand, no matter which kind of audience you want to connect with. So in this context, Lorraine, what about your gallery? Do you guys kind of brainstorm or create any like tactics perhaps pandemic to able to reach out to your audience or your collectors when social distancing and international travel is not allowed?
So for our gallery, I think during the pandemic, we've realized there's a lot of online material that is being provided to the audience, and art fairs resolved to doing online fairs. So there was, in a way, a lot of supply of art digitally. And for me, I thought that the online fairs were less attractive after probably the first or second time you viewed it, because you kind of get a bit fatigued after seeing so much art and just keep on clicking on every web page of each gallery and then click onto each artwork to find more detail. So in a way, for the audience, it's quite tiring. And so we decided that we wanted to focus on content that was meaningful to the artist. So either it was to create conversations between artists. So we did also do like an online journal, so an in-depth interview with the artist, and then that became an online journal for us, bilingual, so that someone in China can also read it on WeChat. And then we also did a digital a viewing of video. So we did a screening as an exhibition, because we also work with a lot of video artists. And so that was kind of a trial for us, whether or not a screening could be effective online, whether people will find time or engage with a video that's more than 5 minutes. And it's hard to say how well people engaged, but then at least during COVID times, people were stuck at home. And for those who had the patience, it was probably more likely that they would watch a more in-depth full-length video than a short one. So that was one of our endeavors. And then we also probably decided not to do so many online shows, because it was just very hard to gauge people's interest. So depending on what you were offering, if you were showing a lot of paintings and they happened to be visually very attractive, I think online shows were quite effective for some galleries. But for us, I think because some of our artists' work require a bit more kind of critical thinking and understanding before you get into the project, online shows were just not possible for us. So then we decided to do physical shows in certain locations, and just expect that people would not see the show, but we would document them properly and then share the information with the audience. So for example, we did some shows in Shanghai last November. We were not able to physically be there, but the artist was in Shanghai. We had colleagues also based in Shanghai, and the audience in Shanghai enjoyed the show very much. And we kind of sacrificed the idea of us being able to present the show to the audience. But the result was that it was very successful and people really enjoyed it. So I still think that the physical experience of an exhibition is extremely important. And in a way, even though people cannot physically be there, I think deep inside, I think because it's art, people really need to know that it exists somewhere. So even though you may not be able to travel to New York or London, but I think you will still be aware of what's happening in another place in this time. So for us, I think the physical show remained very important. And then it was about doing projects that artists would enjoy, we would enjoy, and then just kind of also slowing down a little bit, especially I think for Hong Kong, we went through a lot in the last 2 years, especially for galleries, you know, like not having visitors, and for those who are based in Central, and then COVID. So it's a lot for the city, I think, but also it was a good time for us at least, to kind of reflect on, you know, why galleries have to be working in such a high speed, whether exhibitions have been properly promoted, whether artists had really sufficient time to prepare. So things like that, like the system of the art world kind of needed a kind of reset, and this reset in a way can be very healthy for everyone. So yeah.
So thank you so much. I think this is something that I would like to touch on later with Fiona. So it's very obvious that no matter how great the digital programs are, in-person interactions or in physical exhibitions are unreplaceable, obviously. So for Hauser and Wirth, you know, with so many gallery spaces all over the world, I'm sure at the beginning of the pandemic, there must be some hindrances or limitations that you guys have faced. So can you share a little bit of those difficulties, and how did you guys kind of resolve that as well?
Yeah, so it's an interesting question. So yes, a lot of these galleries have been actually closed as well. We were lucky in Hong Kong that we were open most of the time. But I would say we, as a gallery, became more localized. So for example, we opened our space in Southampton. We tried, you know, to reconnect with our audiences that are more local to the gallery, like what I did in Hong Kong. You know, I didn't move for more than a year and was able to reconnect with everyone on the ground. So we tried to do this internationally. I think, as Lorraine said, the speed of the art world was on a very high level. We would travel around the globe. And so it just gave us a moment to kind of reconnect with the audience that is more local to the different gallery locations. And so we had a mix between online exhibitions that for us actually went very well. Some of them actually sold out within a few hours, but obviously also showing and showcasing artists' work that people were familiar with. So a lot of our audiences were able to see that work prior, you know, on other occasions, or the artist's work. I think it would be more challenging to maybe introduce an artist's work via an online exhibition. So we had a kind of a mixed approach, as we would say, between physical and digital, you know, where, yeah, we tried to kind of adapt to the situation as quickly as we could.
All right. So talking about like social media and digital engagement, it's very obvious that millennial collectors also know how to use these tools and protocols to create their own space or their own territory in the art market. So I would love to know what do you think these millennial collectors in Asia are trying to change the art market? Like, what exactly do you think they're trying to conquer, or things that they want to improve, for example? And some of the, or I would also love to know what are your observations on their first activities or tactics that they are frequently using just to, you know, to achieve that. So perhaps we can also ask Lorraine about this first.
Tactics, I think. Well, if they follow the program of the gallery, I think that gives them an edge in a way that they know what's happening next with the artist. Some of the younger artists who are maybe gaining more momentum with the art world, they just do shows or projects one after another. So if they happen to be following the artist, they would constantly ask us about what's happening next. You know, is there anything, new artworks that are being offered in the next project? So for those very kind of keen collectors, that's what they will do. They will keep up to date closely with what's happening. They would not wait for the gallery to offer something to them, because usually if this artist happens to be fairly popular and there are very limited works being offered each time, slowly there will be a wait list of the artist's works. And in order to remind the gallery how keen this collector is, they usually will just keep reminding you of their strong interest in the work and things like that. And another thing, I guess, because with the millennials, they're also very friendly and casual in communicating with us. So they don't mind to push the gallery a bit more, or things like that. But I think there's no problem with that. And it's also nice to know how keen they are about the work. And for what the artists who we work with, I would say we don't often come across collectors who buy in order to resell immediately. We don't have that problem yet. So usually the buyer is keen to collect for him or herself. So it's really because they're passionate about the work. And our only concern is whether or not they will resell the work immediately. And so that takes time for us to understand who the collector is and whether they're really genuine about collecting. So for some young collectors, I think the investment side of collecting is very interesting for them. And so galleries just need to be a little bit cautious about that.
So I think because for this talk, we also would like to know more about their approach of collecting. So I think this is a great entrance to explore a little bit of that side of today's topic. So Fiona, I'm pretty sure your gallery has quite a lot of artists that do have high investment potential, and a lot of them already have really crazy secondary market records. So as Lorraine has mentioned just now, there might be a group of millennial collectors that may be keen on seeing art collecting as a way of investment. I want to know how perhaps your approach of interacting and communicating with this particular group of collectors, and how do you usually communicate with them and make sure that they're not only collecting art just as a financial derivative, but also there is a dimension of appreciating aesthetic or the artistic value of the artist that they're trying to acquire?
Yeah, so it's actually interesting. Some of our artists have achieved record prices actually last year and this year in Hong Kong. So it shows quite beautifully that these millennial collectors sometimes influence maybe even their parents' generation to help them collect what they like, or they themselves, bid on the auctions. You see that apparently 10 top prices that have been achieved worldwide for artists that are younger than 40 years has all happened in Hong Kong. Actually last year and this year. One example is Avery Singer, for example, or Nicholas Pardy. These are artists that we work with. In terms of, the demand of these artists, yes, we have a very strong demand. And what we usually do is that we start conversations with these collectors. And, for us as a gallery, it is a bit of a mission of creating a legacy for the artists. So we have to be a bit strategic on, where do we sell the works to? Are we going to place them in public museums? Is it better to maybe place it in a private foundation, in maybe a location where the artist has not had that much presence? So these conversations are very strategic sometimes and are based on different artists' needs and interest level. But yes, we have to be a bit careful that these works are not getting flipped straight away, also given that our primary market prices are much lower than the secondary market prices that will be achieved at auction. So there is a potential there for flipping. Yeah.
Understand. So perhaps, one of the hypes that we are encountering, throughout this past few months is definitely NFT. And because Fiona, you mentioned like flipping and like quick investment, quick cash. I'm pretty sure NFT in a way falls into that category, but I personally don't believe NFT is just for financial opportunity. I believe there might be some other aspects that we can further discover and explore that might actually create a more positive or more multi-dimensional impact on the art industry itself. So talking about that, I will definitely want to know perhaps Lorraine's thoughts on NFT. Like, what are your ideas in terms of NFT as a medium or as a technology? So definitely would like to know more about that, so that our audiences today will actually may have a better insight of what NFT art is. Yeah.
So it took me some time to understand what is NFT art. I think I understand it, but from what I understand, it's a very interesting technology, and I think the recent auction results have really all gave us the opportunity to understand better what it's all about. And for galleries like us, we don't work with any artists who produce or make works in NFT yet. But slowly, I think there's one artist who is a video artist told me that she was interested to do something with NFT. So I think that's very positive. It's a new door, a new medium for artists to at least research on. And I think the system of NFT is very interesting for artists, especially when we work with a lot of video artists. I think the idea of collecting and keeping the copyright of the artwork as an NFT is a very useful tool. So I think for a certain type of digital works, NFT would be very helpful to serve for the artist. But whether or not the artist should decide to use NFT and to create NFT artworks, that's really depending on each individual. So, but I think there's a potential for it. Maybe it won't be coming very close to the fine art world, but there's definitely an audience for NFT art right now. So there are more attempts to create bridges between these two worlds, and I don't see why that would not happen. There must be some way to link the two, and if it really creates a larger audience for fine art world, I think that can also be beneficial for many artists.
So I think in a way it seems like, Lorraine, you think because perhaps NFT art at the moment it's still at early stage of development. So it seems like everything is not really sure yet of how it will interact with the fine art or regular art world. So perhaps I would love to know a little bit more of your opinion of perhaps why do you think, assumingly, perhaps a fine artist or a fine art collector may not be as interested with NFT art, for example, compared with those who are, for example, yeah.
Well, I think for artists who we have worked with, it has always been so important to build a career based on critical support. So having museum exhibitions, institutions, having curators comment, and having also people look at, comment the work is very important. I think that is how art was supposed to be looked at, especially with contemporary art. It's still in the making, but I don't think there is yet critical support in NFT art right now, but that doesn't mean that it cannot happen. I think people are just not so educated yet about what's happening with NFT art. But from what you can see, it's all digital. They are kind of short images of, let's say, a few seconds, and it exists digitally, but it's still very far behind from what's happening with fine artists, with what they're doing in the digital world. So like video artists, artists who does VR. I mean, what artists are doing today is much more developed and much more thought through than what you see in the NFT world. But it doesn't mean that NFT can, maybe this is the very, very beginning, and maybe in a very short period of time, we will see something that's much more developed.
Mm-hmm. Talk about just technology. I just want to let audiences know that Henrietta may not be able to join this talk as a guest speaker due to technical issues, but I'm sure we can like include her ideas and comments afterwards. So jumping back to Fiona, I definitely want to know what Hauser and Wirth thinks about NFT art. What do you guys think of the potential or potential drawbacks? I would definitely know a little bit more of the critical, your critical idea of this very new genre.
Well, Cousin, you mentioned NFT art as a flipping of NFT. I think that is basically the basic function of NFT, is like ownership and transfer, right? So we are at the point where we have a highly flippable asset. And I feel that many NFTs are actually art facades that are kind of connected maybe to a financial asset. And, you know, tokens that are bearing an imagery sometimes also are referred to as collectibles. So not as artworks. Art, like works, are related to paintings and sculpture, and collectible is much more referring to what you can do with it. So you can collect, or you can sell, you can flip. You can change ownership. So I think we're early stage. When you look at NFT as technology, I find it highly interesting because, you know, the blockchain technology is promising. You can talk about tracking of provenance. You can even talk about uniqueness, and then you can make sure that the artwork is a real artwork by a specific artist. And then obviously you have smart contracts where you can even add the royalty fees of an artist, so the artist can benefit if such an NFT gets sold again. So these are all interesting phenomena. Now, there are also challenges like legal challenges, right? So the contracts the artists are signing, if they upload their NFT on these platforms, are sometimes a bit controversial, you know, also in terms of intellectual property, or contracts they have with their galleries. So this has to be looked at a bit. And then obviously on our end, environmental concerns. So the gallery is very much into cutting our carbon footprints until 2030 by 50%. And we all know that NFT is using a lot of electricity. So that's maybe a concern. But if we think about NFT as a medium itself, I find this interesting. When I was in university, everyone was talking to me about the end of painting. And you think about people like Fontana, who kind of pushed the boundary of painting into the sculptural sphere, or even Jack Whitten, who we currently have on view at the gallery here in Hong Kong, kind of blurring the boundaries between painting and sculpture. And then you have in the room of sculpture, you have people like Duchamp or Piero Manzoni who have been so radical. And I've noticed that in the last years, there was like a surge of artists for new mediums. So if you think about like post-internet art movements or artists that really wanted to capture the life or the moment we're living in, I feel that this could maybe be potentially a new medium, but we are so early stage that there is much more, you know, in terms of regulations and more details that need to be discussed in terms of NFT art. We personally, as a gallery, we observe the space. We find it's very interesting. We actually have artists that have expressed interest. Avery Singer is someone who has been working in the space and is interested in it since a while. So I think there is more to come, and we keep our eyes open and we'll follow it.
I think it's very important that you point out the difference of work and collectible, because I think a lot of people don't really observe this very difference in terms of the term or the definition, but I think it's very important when we talk about NFT and fine art, assuming these are still very different concepts, because I think with the word collectible, it seems it's still relatively more associated with investment, you know, financial gain and ownership. But with works of art, there is still, you know, a layer of aesthetics or at least an interest of institutional, academic, or artistic value of whatever work it is. So, but I find it quite interesting that you point out about the environmental factor, because in the art world, we're not environmentally friendly. We use a lot of bubble wraps to, you know, pack the works. When we ship, it's a lot of carbon footprint. And talking about NFT, we have like, you know, electricity usage. So I think this is also a part that I would like to slightly tackle on. It's that how do you think artists, or at least for galleries, how can we perhaps explore a little bit of how NFT can help with environment, like in terms of environment besides electricity? Because I'm sure like NFT, like we don't use like oil or acrylic, so there is a reduce of water pollution, for example, or to the artists it's less, you know, respiratory diseases, for example. So I would love to kind of explore a little bit of that in the upcoming few minutes, perhaps. So Lorraine and Fiona, who would you like to kind of talk about that? Yeah.
I think for artists, it's very hard to think of environmental friendliness, because their practice usually, I think they are more concerned about what they do rather than concerns about eco-friendliness. So let's say if you're working with a painter, his stretchers are made of wood, his canvas is made of canvas, and the work has to be created, and the crate is made of wood, and you have to ship it by air. So the carbon footprint of selling a painting is very high. And not just talking about the crate itself, I mean, to show it at an art fair, the number of walls that we have to pull up at the fair for a 5-day fair is a lot. So the carbon footprint of the art business is just not eco-friendly, period. The only way for it to be eco-friendly is if everyone does digital work, but you can't do that also. So the good thing is that there are more digital artists of today than before. So there's more variety in terms of mediums they can look at. But I don't think you can ever diminish the value of painting also. So it's really hard. And for sculpture, there's a lot of trial and error. So when you see a finished sculpture by an artist, he probably did 50 trials before he got to the final work. So there's a lot of waste material that probably was not recycled. So so I think it's very difficult. But in terms of the business of the art for galleries, I do agree. Like there are ways for galleries to lower cost and to be more eco-friendly, and that takes time for sure. But I would say the logistics of the art business is just not very friendly overall.
What about Fiona?
Well, actually, I think there are blockchains that are getting created at the moment that are apparently very eco-friendly. So maybe there are ways of new NFT models that will, arise where we can use these blockchains that are ecologically more suitable. So on that end, but in terms of like Galerie, yes, it has been an incredible journey for us as an internationally operating gallery, and we're very committed. We want to kind of really cut our carbon emission by 50% in 2030. So this is big, and we talk from localizing, why does a work need to be shipped all the way to somewhere else where the artist, across the world from the artist studio, but then you could argue, well, you need exposure, etc. So we're evaluating all these different details, really trying to find ways of cutting wherever we can. So it has been a really interesting process, and we hope we manage and we'll get a manual to everyone testing some ideas how to do it.
So just one last follow-up. In terms of the collectors you deal with, do you think they are now actually also considering this kind of eco-friendly aspect, or do you think this is still such a very initial idea among the collector circle?
In terms of people who collect NFTs as their, or
that NFT or fine art?
I think in terms of fine art, maybe less. People are maybe less aware, what it means to build an art fair, to ship around the world. Sometimes actually we make points where when we ship work all the way to Asia, that we also sell within Asia and that we don't ship everything back to the US or Europe. So for example, our Basel, Hong Kong last week, we placed the works in the region, trying to avoid kind of the back and forth. But I think, yes, maybe the collectors don't yet have, mostly don't have the awareness regarding, environmental aspects.
Lorraine, do you have a similar observation as Fiona, or?
I think if you're into collecting art, then it kind of breaks your idea about being eco-friendly. So it kind of is hard to put the two together. But we have actually worked with quite a few collectors who only collect video art. And I think that is a way to be very eco-friendly because you don't have to store your artworks, and everything can be saved in your computer. So so that is a way of collecting and can save some trees.
I think so. Yeah, the reason I kind of want to touch on this a little slightly is because I think when I'm doing research, I do think NFT may have a potential as a medium to kind of contribute in that aspect for the art industry. So perhaps we still have around 10 minutes until 6 in Hong Kong. I would love to know if any of our participants would like to ask our speakers any questions, or to me as well. So feel free to ask the questions on the comments, or just let us know.
I think there's a few questions, Cousin, in the Q&A section.
Yes, let me have a look. So, okay. Okay, let's start with Vitaly. So mentioned topic of short and visual approach. Okay, so I think this for Fiona, maybe it will be better for you to answer. So Vitaly asks that, oh, because perhaps the collectors may have shortened the attention spans, and that you also coined the term digital. So what do you think would stick with us in terms of formats and methods once the pandemic is over? Do you think this kind of digital approach will be something that is consistent or sustainable, or do we think we still have to kind of continue to brainstorm different ways for engagement?
I think we always need to brainstorm different ways of engagement. That's how we keep afloat and stay innovative. But in general, I think the phygital approach is an approach that we will take forward. Beautiful example, our Basel Hong Kong last week, the energy was electric, and they had these people that came with Zoom calls, collectors from all over the world joined us. You know, we were able to greet them, talk about the artworks. So they were able to see what the atmosphere was like in the fair, and we had so many positive feedbacks and impressions from it. So this showed me again how important that somehow is, and that people love to attend also if it's not physical. And I think that might be something of how to reduce international travel, you know, that partially if someone cannot see a show, there may be ways of getting a certain experience from it in a physical, digital, phygital way. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Awesome, thank you, Fiona. And there seems to also be questions to Lorraine. So there's an attendee who would like to ask, has the way your gallery document and share artworks changed the way the artists treated or created their artworks in terms of value-wise? Yes.
No, I don't think artists have been so sensitive yet to what they do, and I surely hope that doesn't change, because if artists start changing their work just to suit the commercial market and the way that the gallery should document the work, that would definitely influence the quality or the genuinity of how genuine the work is. And so I hope that doesn't happen. And I think that should only be adjusted from the gallery's point of view, like how we document the work, whether or not it's through high-res images, multiple views, or making a documentary video. These are ways that we can make the work more accessible to the public, but I think the work itself has to stay as pure and genuine as it is. So obviously, there are works that are very hard to document with a camera or even by video. So in the digital world, there are works that will tend to lose its strength because of that. But I think then it's the gallery's job in a way to communicate on the work effectively and to get that message across. But I don't want that to be an element for artists to be concerned about.
Mm-hmm. There is also someone that would like to follow up on the discussion about the environmental side of the arts. So this is for Lorraine. Do you think with the learning curve we have during pandemic, would there be perhaps more discussion from the public or artists about shifting the way we see and create artworks? I think this is somehow similar to what you've just answered, but perhaps on the environmental aspect, do you have anything to add in that context?
Definitely. I think environmental issues have been in the mind behind some artists' practice. But then I wouldn't say the output is not necessarily a solution to resolving what's happening today. But I think usually it's more embedded into the work and what you see. I think it's one of the concerns of what artists do, but it usually artists think about many different things, and then they work out something that is still of their own language. They're not environmentalists, so the output usually is kind of filtered and then synthesized into something else. So I think the concerns are definitely at the back of their mind, but it may not be as noticeable sometimes.
So for Fiona, about the kind of a program, a digital initiative that Hauser has developed, Art Lab. So one of them wants to know, do you think this tool will be a way to collaborate with other galleries? And if how would you guys use that platform, basically, perhaps with artists and other stakeholders in the industry?
So we actually, for example, launched a VR artist residency in Los Angeles. So this is a program that gives artists a possibility to work with our VR tools that we have developed. And I could imagine that this is broadened out, like getting access to a broader audience or potentially other galleries in the future. It is really a think tank where we try to be progressive and find new ways of creating digital content and approaching the digital world. Initially, we also found it was very interesting to mapping out, for example, museums for artists to have shows in, which also cuts our footprint when it comes to carbon emission, because we were exactly able to determine which works have to be shipped to a certain museum or which works have to be shipped to the art fair. So there's a lot of benefit that comes from these endeavors and investigations in that digital room.
I think this art lab kind of initiative will definitely create some sort of impact to different stakeholders, and I think that's great that Hauser is doing it. Especially you guys have so many spaces in globally. I think that will be quite interesting to observe in the future. And also, I would like to kind of finish this talk with a slightly more light-weighted topic. So I also want to know. So as gallery owners or directors, do you have any advice that you would give for those who want to start collecting art? Perhaps Lorraine, you can answer first.
Sure. For those who want to start collecting, I think the most important is to start looking and start looking actively. And I think when you don't understand something, take the initiative to ask questions. I think that's the easiest way to learn. And I think when you start following galleries or an artist who you like, I think it's a good way as an entry to understanding also what the gallery does. And I think that a good gallery usually will give you good advice and guidelines to think of what you should look at or what you may be interested in. And I think the art world is a lot about that. It's about communication between people, striking conversations. And then one day you will find that your friend also likes similar things, or you will meet someone who has similar taste to you, and then you will share your ideas and views about the art. At the end of the day, there's no right or wrong when it comes to art. So it's very subjective. And it's about knowing slowly what you like, really. And actually that also changes through time. But that is the joy of collecting. You grow with how you collect, and it's a journey in a way. So it's a very fun thing to do, because there are many, many interesting artists who are doing incredible work right now. So yeah, you will never be bored, I guess, once you start. Yeah.
So Fiona, just perhaps a short comment on that as well.
I couldn't agree more.
That's true. So I feel, again, thank you so much for, of course, Lorraine, Fiona, for joining us on Online Talk, and of course, Henrietta, but unfortunately due to technical issues, she's not able to participate. But of course, we also want to thank all the participants of the talk from all over the world. And of course, lastly, thank you, our Power Hong Kong, to have all of us for this online talk. And we hope to continue our conversation in a different setting. So thank you, Lorraine and Fiona. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Have a nice day.